This is TWiT.
So I'm sure, Sam, you're following Project Titan. It's constantly in the news, which is interesting. I thought it was going to go away, Apple's car project. It seems to be changing a little bit. They've assigned Kevin Lynch now to run it, which is, I think, a sign. He's the guy who put Apple Watch on the map. And he's the guy that you assign to a new product when you're getting ready to launch it, to make sure it launches with a bang. They've been hiring people right and left from all sorts of companies, including Tesla. They did just lose their battery guy. But is Project Titan on the high burner right now? Is that what you think?
It certainly seems to be getting a little more attention again. I mean, I wrote my first article about the Apple car back in February 2015. And I wrote a whole series of articles back in 2015 about this, and more or less stopped after that because there wasn't much else to say. And frankly, most of what I wrote back then, looking back over it again, and I put a link in the rundown to my blog where I wrote this stuff, is still true today. I think I have a very hard time believing that Apple is going to get into the business of building and selling cars to consumers. It is and always has been a very low margin business, with a few exceptions. There are a few companies that have managed to become very high, to maintain very high margins in the business. Brands like Porsche and Ferrari, but they're also relatively low volume manufacturers, compared to a Toyota or Volkswagen. And it just doesn't seem like the kind of business that Apple would want to get into. It's just not what Tim Cook likes to pursue. If they were to do this, read the latest thing that Mark Gurman published, which I thought, to me seemed rather flawed in its thinking. Was that they were going to build an autonomous vehicle with no steering wheel, no pedals, and frankly, that is not. I think we will have vehicles on the road that match that description in 2025, which is the timeline that Gurman gave. Those vehicles are going to be very limited in where they can operate and the conditions they can operate in.
There'll be trucks.
They're going to be.
There'll be
trucks, there'll be robo-taxis, delivery vehicles, and they will operate in very specific operating domains.
Like Waymo right now, you can't use it in downtown San Francisco. You can only use it in the very much simpler avenues part of San Francisco.
Yeah, and that domain. Is that because
level 4 and level 5 is so hard to do that they're just not there?
It is. It's extremely difficult to do. The world is a very difficult place, and for all of our flaws as human beings, we are shockingly good at doing perception of the world around us in ways that computers simply cannot handle with anywhere near the same degree of reliability. AI is not nearly good enough, not nearly reliable enough to do safety critical operations like this. Yeah, it's fine for doing facial recognition or a lot of other applications that it's used for, but for something where the consequences of making a mistake mean that people die,
that's not good.
It's not anywhere close to being ready for that. Yeah. And it probably won't be for a long time.
Well, and there's also the issue of humans who are unpredictable. And if you're a software trying to understand what's going on, it's kind of challenging to understand what a human's
and
up to.
That actually has turned out to be one of the toughest parts of this. You can sort of break down the autonomous driving problem into 4 main steps: perception, making sense of the world around you. What are the things? Identifying all the stuff around you and where it is in physical space around you. Then predicting what all those other road users are going to do in the next 3 to 5 seconds. Then path planning, figuring out what is your path that you're going to take through that environment, and then control, actually executing the brakes and the steering and the acceleration to make that path happen. Well, it turns out that perception is really hard, but prediction is even harder. Understanding what other road users are going to do in the next 3 to 5 seconds is really, really hard, and that's something that AI and software is still really struggling with. And so, I think if Apple were to go down this path, the way they're likely to do it is as a robo-taxi model, as a service model. I don't think you'll ever be, or at least not for a very long time, be able to go and buy an Apple car.
But golly, if you look at how much money Uber is losing as a rideshare, billions a year, do you think Apple could make money at this?
Well, there's an important difference here. Apple is a company that goes after premium customers,
so they
premium
can charge
segments.
More. Yeah.
Right. So, they are not going to offer the kind of cheap Uber and Lyft rides that we became used to pre-pandemic. Even now, Apple or Uber and Lyft, they have raised their prices dramatically over the last several years.
They're still losing money.
And they're still losing money. Apple, the Apple customers, and the thing is, doing the robo-taxi model, Apple can be very selective about where it operates. It doesn't have to be everywhere. It can be in places
just
like
Beverly
San Francisco
Hills. And it's just
Beverly Hills
stars.
and Miami, South Beach and Manhattan.
It's not a $1 billion business, though. I hate to say it. That's a lot of money to spend for a very narrow business.
It's going to be really tough to get the kind of revenues that Apple likes from this kind of business.
Do you think Mark Gurman got it wrong? I mean, he's quoting anonymous sources. But he says even within the Project Titan team, there's dispute over whether they'd be able to do it in that very advanced timeline, 2025. But at the same time, he also says, and I think this is public record, the hires, they just hired Tesla's former self-driving software director, C.J. Moore, a climate system expert from Volvo, a manager from Daimler, battery engineers from Karma, sensor engineer from GM's Cruise, automotive safety. I mean, they're on a tear.
Yeah, but they've been doing that for the last 7 years. They've hired a lot of people, with similar credentials over the last 7 years, and a lot of those people are no longer there. A lot of them have left. So they're
almost
as
fast like people
years.
like Doug Field leaving, almost as fast as they're hiring. People are leaving. Yeah,
exactly. That's part of why they have to keep hiring, because people keep leaving.
Yeah.
They get frustrated that they can't achieve the goal that they want.
Lynch is the 5th person to take charge in 7 years.
Yeah.
I think the journalists and the public at large are thinking of this possibly completely wrong. And if I'm right, I want to come back and moonwalk all over the studio.
Let's record this right now. Doc Rock is about to
If I'm wrong, I'll admit it. I'll admit it that I'm wrong. I'm not afraid to admit that I'm wrong. I think that Apple's play into the industry is going to be more like Texas Instruments or more like Faruja, if you know about digital cinema processing, things like that. No, I meant like it's it was basically signal processing in your DVD players and all your Sony, TV cameras and equipment.
Yes.
Right. They're fantastic. So if you take the M1 and its computational skills, its neural engines, all of that stuff, all right, you rebranded, I don't know, Car 1, C1, Auto 1, whatever, and you become the digital signal processing in these cars. So Sam, I know you're familiar with Denon and the other chips that people used to put in their cars to make them faster. Basically, it was recalculating fuel mixtures and shift lines and things like that. Imagine taking the tech that we have in an iPhone, an iPad, an M1-based processor, and allowing your car to make process decisions at a scale unheard of. Okay. The other thing that Apple is really, really good with is sensors. So taking the 6 Sony cameras, Sony visual sensors that would have been in these goggles or something, and put them in a car, you're taking some of the safety things that you can add, not make it necessarily autonomous, make vehicles safer, make vehicles more fuel efficient because you're making more educated decisions on fuel curves, making creature comfort better so that people can absorb things and pick up knowledge, order food, order, things, check on their kids, all of the above stuff that we now do semi with the phone. If you become a processor or something that lives in these cars, you generate $1 billion industry without having to build the whole car. You let everybody else build it. No, you become Firestone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Doc. I think that Apple, if they wanted to, could be a really important automotive supplier because they do have a lot of really key strengths. Their processing capability, making very high-powered, very power-efficient processors, which is key, especially when you're talking about electric vehicles. You need to have high performance per watt. You don't want to be drawing too much power for your autonomous system.
It does solve a problem Apple has. They're sitting on a gold mine with this Apple Silicon. They don't want to give it to any other manufacturer of PCs. They want to make it exclusive to Macs. That's going to sell Macs. But they would like, I bet you anything, they would like to do something with this gold mine besides build Macintoshes. So that's
the question is, though, would Apple want to sell chips to some other automaker,
and would people buy
they're
them?
not in control of it?
Yeah, and would
that
people
is
buy
so
well, I think if they offered
it feels
them,
like it, yeah.
I think if Apple offered to sell the chips, I think that there's a lot of automakers that would want to buy Apple Silicon.
Nvidia's doing well that way, right?
Nvidia's doing really well.
Yeah.
Qualcomm is picking up a whole bunch of business. NXP, TI,
are these all
even
ARM
Intel and
architecture?
Mobileye.
Are mostly ARM architecture?
It's a mix of a bunch of different things. I mean, just as Apple Silicon chips are not pure ARM. There's ARM. They all use ARM CPU cores,
right.
But they all have neural engines. They all have GPUs and tensor chips. So there's a wide variety of stuff that goes into these SoCs.
Father Robert, you're saying this isn't in Apple's DNA. They've never done anything that's not sold to the public before.
The last time they did this was pre-Jobs. It was under Scully when they started allowing third parties to manufacture Apple clones. I don't see them doing this with a core technology like the M1. I see this more as this is Apple's IBM play. They're looking at a new industry and they're saying, you know what? We can set ourselves up with so much IP that people will have to come to us to license any new self-driving technology. They don't want to sell their silicon.
That's a really interesting idea.
I'll take that.
A patent portfolio. That's very interesting.
That's still better than thinking they're going to build a whole car. I just don't see them building a whole car. I'll take what Father Robert says. Or even me, even for them giving chips, I don't mean sell them the chips with somebody else is going to program it, have their hands in it, and mess it up. If Apple's going to give you a chip, they're going to do everything in house. They're going to build it per your spec, and then maybe give it to you. They're not going to let you play with it and screw it up, and then make them look bad. Yeah. So I agree with
patent portfolio. That's interesting, and that's, by the way, how Qualcomm, not just IBM, but Qualcomm makes most of its money. So that's a very interesting idea.
That's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Once you have an IP, you milk it for generations.
Yeah.
So the only challenge with that, and I agree, I think that would be an interesting approach for Apple to take. There's already a lot of competition for all of those pieces of that puzzle. And does Apple actually have enough that's unique that others have to license?
They have one
because,
thing.
as I said, you've got a bunch of chip makers. There's 70 different LiDAR companies out there.
Chip IP, but maybe software, self-driving software.
But I would believe there's brand rec too, though, right? So, for instance, when you're going to go look for this new car, right, we're 4 years down the line, and you want to buy the car,
Apple
and you
inside.
find out it has Apple
M1
chips inside or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, the brand rec just leveled up that car. It was like,
is that enough for Apple though?
Maybe not, but it would help the manufacturers, right? Because I remember wanting to grow up and get my own car that had Nakamichi sound because the ghetto GM sound was just whack, and I wanted Nakamichi sound. And then it turned out later on we grew up. Block Punk 2, there's another one. You know what I'm saying? But those were how you did it, right? Or it came with the Corinthian leather. Remember the Chrysler Cordova, the first car with the Corinthian leather?
I think they invented Corinthian leather, actually.
Yeah, they did. Somebody went in the Bible.
It was a marketing term.
But there was the Chrysler Cordova with what's his name? Fantasy Island.
Ricardo Montalban.
You want to get the Chrysler with Corinthian leather.
Wait, was it the Chrysler that had that wooden accent around the car?
Yes,
it was like
that's
a wooden
the one.
belt.
It's called the Cordova.
Yeah.
Sam knows because he got one. He got one in the garage.
No, I never had a Cordoba, but
and I think they would play. Oh my God!
I just know as a half Latino, every Latino man in the neighborhood wanted a Cordova because it was a car with a good Latino name.
But I mean, just in chips, there's a huge market for automotive chips. Qualcomm had their investor day last week or the week before, and they have for their new Snapdragon Ride platform, which is their chips for autonomous vehicles and ADAS, driver assist.
That's the guy right there, bro. He even got it in brown. Oh, God.
This is
Corinthian leather.
Corinthian.
Yet it is on the highway where Cordoba best answers my
Where's
demand.
Tattoo?
That was an awful car.
Was it? It looks like an awful car.
It was an
Looks like a
awful
boat.
car.
Looks like a boat going down the
It
highway.
was. All you saw was Mac Daddies and Angel Flights and those collars that came out to your shoulders. Dude, that's filmed in Hawaii right there. That is Hanama Bay.
I have great confidence.
Oh, I love Hanama
For
Bay.
which there
That
can
car
be
weighed about 10
no
tons, by the way.
Close.
I have
Bruh, who
what I
dug
need.
this up? You should be ashamed of yourself.
But,
Cordoba.
Qualcomm has a $13 billion backlog of orders for their Snapdragon Ride platform
Wow.
for driver assist.
Is that because of the chip shortage or because they?
No,
really-
that's just they've
demand.
put together what appears to be a really good silicon platform for these driver assist and
So it's it's a
autonomous systems.
crowded
and,
market.
and they've got a lot of orders.
I just remember Apple's in this situation. They had the single most successful product of all time, probably, certainly most successful consumer electronic product with the iPhone, and they've got to appease the stock market who's saying, well, what have you done for me lately? They need the next big thing. They're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in cash. It's perfectly reasonable they've got so many chips, they can put them on black and red and pass. They don't care and so they're going to do AR, they're going to do cars, they're going to do health. They may all flop, but they got to do something, and they got enough money to try all three. I agree. I think the longest shot is the car.
But I gauge the reward for success. AR, VR, you can make that into a consumer product. If it's successful, you have huge.
It's the
margins.
closest thing to the iPhone, right? It's like
Precisely,
the next iPhone.
but the car,
It's a natural extension.
Even if
Right.
the car was successful, they would never get the margins they would want. I mean, people compare it to Tesla, but remember, Tesla last year they made $1.6 billion in incentives, only $721 million on actually selling cars.
Right.
Apple's not going to repeat that, so they don't want to sell a car. A car is going to be such a millstone around their neck come profit time.
Yeah, if they do anything, they want a service. They want mobility as a service. And even that is going to be a stretch, whether that's going to be enough to tip the scales for what they want out of a business.